Welcome, everyone, to Keynote's session on inventors. This is the second in a series, the second episode in a series called Invention, Inventors, and Inventing. It's no secret that inventions have transformed humanity. You don't have to look very far to find inventions that have changed the course of human history, usually for the better. You look around in human health and agriculture, in materials, energy, and you see inventions all over. And they're really rather remarkable. Once you start to look, you see inventions that have really had major impact. And then lots of inventions that have had impact, maybe not so visible, and yet important. I love inventions. I've been working with inventions now for several decades. I'm an inventor myself, hold a US patent, and got into this decades ago because I love inventions. And I've realized with inventions, some are successful, some are not. You never know quite where they might lead. But I think they're the lifeblood of a successful society and humanity. And if you love inventions, you got to love inventors. I have worked with hundreds of inventors over the years, and without inventors, you think about it for just a brief moment, you realize we would have no inventions. So these are the individuals, the creatives, who produce the inventions that make the impact that improve our lives. This session, this is the first time I've had a chance to sit down with inventors. I know them well, they're prolific. They're the epitome of inventors, but I invited them in here for some other reasons, not just because of their inventiveness. But this is the first time I've had a chance to have a discussion with inventors about being an inventor. So we'll see where the dialogue goes. I am excited to see what we'll learn. And so I want to just, before I introduce our three inventors, illustrious inventors, and thank them very much for their time to be here. Yes, I reached out to them because they are all, as I say, the epitome of inventors, creating impactful invention, creating new things that have new functionality, advantages, etc. But I picked these and invited these inventors because, in my view, the depth of their humanity. There's something about these individuals. They're more than just inventors, and of course you will hear they have really quite amazing professional accomplishments. An inventor, the title of inventor is only one. But that is why they're here, because they're inventors, but I love their humanity. So our three panelists, first of all, Dr. Rohan Munasinghe, professor in the Department of Electronic and Telecommunication Engineering at the University of Moratuwa. However, Rohan now has an appointment at the Tartu University, where he sits now and joining us remotely. And I met Rohan maybe 10 years ago in some innovation seminars in Sri Lanka. Dr. Emmanuel Giannelis, the Walter R. Reed Professor and Engineering and Associate Dean for Innovation. I should also mention he was the former Vice Provost for Research and one of the first inventors that I worked with when I joined Cornell's Technology Transfer Office several decades ago. Dr. David Erickson, the S.C. Thomas, C Director and Sibley College Professor of Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering. All of these inventors have not only invented, patented, spun off companies, and done a variety of other things. Each one of them has some really quite remarkable stories. Before we start with some of the questions that I'd like to pose, I'd like to ask each of you in turn to just give a quick summary of give us a sense of your area of inventing, if you can. I know in some cases that's not easy, but why don't we start with you, David?
Thanks so much. So I'd say, so I'm a mechanical engineer, but I would say the areas of innovation in which we've been able to reduce to practice and create inventions have been pretty broad. Everything ranging from global health to nutrition to aviation fuels and agriculture. And I think that's just part of having a broad skill set allows one to be able to find interesting problems and then find interesting solutions to them.
Thanks. Emmanuel?
Yes, thank you too for participating today. My own training is in chemistry, and so the focus of the work that we've done in my group over the years has been on materials chemistry type of inventions. And so from an application standpoint, they also span a range from energy to coatings for clothing and furniture and things of that kind. But I think if there's an underlying thing is really making new materials by utilizing more what I would call from the bottom up approaches.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Rohan?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me, Rick. I'm an electrical engineer by profession and professor at Tartu Robotics Division. I'm working in multiple areas. For example, I work with elephant localization using seismic waves, part of their rumbles, and then also traffic controls on roads using vision technology and AI, and also development of drones and deploy them for useful applications in, say, smart agriculture. And recently, I ventured myself into biomedical area in monitoring unborn babies in the womb. So quite multidisciplinary projects working on with my colleagues, domain experts, and students. So that's a bit about me.
Thanks, Rohan. And one of the thoughts that come to me as I'm listening to you all is, on one hand, our inventors today are all physical scientists. That said, the range, the type, the variety of inventions that they're all involved in is really quite stunning. And that is one of the attributes of invention, is that it is so complex. And of course, some people will focus deeply in one area and invent deeply in that one discipline. And others are ranging and cross-disciplinary. So it's yet one of many different aspects about invention that I think is fascinating. So even here with number one, all of our panelists are physical scientists. They are also university professors. That has a little different flavor too. I don't know that we need to go into it today. We certainly can. But being an inventor in a university has it's a little different environment. So let me start with a question then. these were questions that I crafted hoping to, tease out similarities and differences and maybe just provoke us all a little bit in terms of our thinking about being an inventor. Let me direct this to you, David. So do you think you were born an inventor, or do you think you could point to something in your childhood or early years that led you to become an inventor?
Yeah, thanks so much. So I don't know that, I don't know what it would mean to be born an inventor, but I do think it's interesting to think back to my early, it wasn't something in my family or anything like that, right? But I do think where all of this started to come up was, like what I would say about inventing, it's partly finding a problem, but also having the resources to be able to address them. And so the first time I can remember doing that was, this is 30 years ago now, but we got one of the first Windows 95 computers. And we had this computer at home, and I didn't know what to do with it. Nobody knew what to do with it. So I just started playing around with it. And as part of just trying to find something useful to do, I ended up inventing one of the first, what we used to call HTML editors. So like you would be able to make it easy for individual people to write web pages, basically. And I think I knew nothing about either of those things, but I think just kind of saying, oh, it's an interesting problem. It's really hard to do this. Can I use this new resource that I have to maybe solve this problem? And then maybe start a little bit of a company and see how that goes. So I think it's not really something that a person necessarily is born with, but maybe finds themselves going down that path.
How old were you when you did that?
This would have been the 90s, so I don't even know if I was an undergrad yet. So early undergrads, maybe.
But you didn't know anything about it, and you didn't let that stop you.
That's right.
Yeah. Rohan, would you say you were born as an inventor if you think back to your childhood?
Yeah, I think this inventiveness should be in your genetics. I understand it now. So all of us, I think we may have had it. We were born inventors. To what degree, we don't know. But the common denominator of all of the inventors is they're curious to know how things work, and they want to open up things and see inside how things put together to work as a single entity. And also they want to alter things, right? And to see whether it works better. So these attributes were there in our genes, probably. That is why we are inventors. Maybe not today, but right from the beginning, we had that alignment. But I remember in my childhood, one incident that struck me to become an inventor, maybe a little bit serious inventor, right? Is that there was a well in the area I used to live, and some people used to come to that well to pull water out of the well. And that was in like early 80s or so. I was like 10 years or so. So I saw people pulling water using the rope and the pulley, and it was kind of tedious thing to do. But then I figured out a way to automate this, to devise what we know now as the manual piston pump, right? And I put things together, very crude one, and operated on the well, and I got the water out. It was my first decision to build something for people. Now we call it social innovation, right? So and also when I was doing this one at one time, when I was testing the pump, I was sitting on the short safety fence, the wall actually around the well. That was a very, very risky thing to do. And somebody had spotted me and yelled at me, and that was the end of the testing for that day. So then I realized, now we know inventors take huge risk, and sometimes they do take that risk knowingly, and sometimes they don't realize the risk, immediate risk they are in. So therefore, these aspects and attributes are within us, all of the inventors. So I think the short answer is, you got to born an inventor. You need to have that genetics, and later you can polish it up and with the help of a mentor and with the ecosystem, you can flourish to become a fully fledged inventor.
Just one comment here before I ask Emmanuel about his early days. I met an inventor, a very wealthy, self-made inventor, and he claimed that the reason he was such a good inventor, he invented the first wireless microphone and did a few other things, and he claimed that the reason he was such a good inventor is that he essentially, because he was a foster child, he stopped being educated at the 3rd grade. And he claimed that he didn't have inventiveness taught out of him, which I always thought, you know, as somebody with 4 degrees, I'm like, oh, well, maybe that's why I'm not as good an inventor, because I just got a little too much school. I don't know. I think it's a provocative thought. But Emmanuel, how about your early days?
I certainly was not born to be an inventor. And in fact, if I go back to my childhood, I was not even good at putting things together. I think I sort of went in that direction during my PhD, and I give credit to my PhD advisor, who had what at the time I thought it was a very annoying attitude. And that was when I would sort of prepare a set of experiments and go to describe what I had found. The first question was, what good is this for? And that sort of trying to make me make a connection between the scientific insights and some application, stir up this idea that maybe what we do not only will get us a good paper out, but maybe can actually make a difference in a grand scheme sometimes. And so I think that's sort of where I started putting these two together. And of course, when I came here and had my own group, and then I picked up the same thing, and I know a lot of my students and postdocs with the same kind of question, we've managed to do a few things and then sort of being inventive, as you said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, clearly invention requires functionality. And that is, I think, one of the differences between creative people who do beautiful art. And I love beautiful art. But beautiful art really doesn't have a function. I mean, you could argue that it's emotionally provocative, but it doesn't really have a function. Whereas inventions, to be an invention, needs to have a function. And so therefore, you then get down into that road of, well, what is it doing? And what is it good for? And is it better, et cetera? So good point. Let me ask you this, David. Could you describe how the inventive process works for you?
Well, let me offer a couple of things there. One is that I think it's really, really easy to invent something, but it's really, really hard to invent something useful. And I think that's the distinguishing factor in terms of being able to, a good inventor is a person that can distinguish that. So I think the inventive process always starts with having a really interesting problem that you yourself can see that you have some angle on. Okay, so it has to be more than an interesting problem. It has to be something that you can say, hey, that's an interesting problem, and I have some skill set, some background knowledge, some thing in my past that's going to allow me to provide some kind of special input into that, right? That, some random problem over there, that's an interesting thing, but I don't see how I can contribute to that. So the first thing is narrowing down to what that is. Second thing is talking to people, right? Just get out there, talk to everybody you can, really just ask questions. Don't be afraid to talk to whoever. They'll want to talk to you about their problem, that's for sure. And then the third thing is I'm a really big believer in early stage prototypes. So the number of times I've showed up in a random place with some piece of garbage that's falling apart and it didn't work the night before and you're trying to get it going and you get there and it kind of doesn't work anyways and these sorts of things. But it gives you something to talk to people about and show them, hey, what do you think about this? And they're like, oh no, that's totally wrong. That's totally wrong. What are you even doing here? These kinds of things. having that kind of a thing is just a really good way to kind of, again, focus where you're starting and allow you to go out from there.
Yeah. One comment you made there about inventions, and the fact is, the really hard part is finding the invention. Easy to invent, but finding the solution that do they solve problems reminds me a little bit of Linus Pauling, who Nobel laureate, who once said, if you're going to have good ideas, you have to have a lot of ideas, which means you just got to live with the fact that you're going to have some that are not optimal. Emmanuel, how about you? How would you describe the inventive process?
I think it sort of goes in two different ways. I would say when I started, it was more or less what I would call the academic model of invention, which was we were working on a particular piece of science and we'll be writing a paper, and as an afterthought, we would then recognize, well, maybe it can sort of be good for X, Y, Z. And so it was more of an afterthought rather than the driving force, the invention that is, of the process. But in, later on, it became more, and there are sort of distinct examples of where either myself or others came to me and gave me a challenge. Can you do this? And they would sort of tell me that this is a particular challenge that has not been met, a solution has not been found yet. And then we'll sort of start working in that area with an idea that this can actually be a good invention. So we've done it both ways. I think the second one is much more purposeful. There's sort of a certain direction to go to. The other one is more accidental. I like the second one better, but I think I've done both, and it's
There, and that. So following on that, Rohan, the question that I had crafted, which Emmanuel's touching on, do your inventions come to you when you're actively trying to solve a problem? Do they arrive unexpectedly, or both?
Mostly when I'm trying to solve a problem, at one stage, the innovation comes. For the most early parts of the process, there's no innovation. It is basically problem solving, state of the art. You analyze the problem and you figure out the prior art, who else has done what, and try to combine the things together. So this is what inventors do all the time, right? Not actually developing things from scratch all the time. We are trying to reuse, recombine the technology is already available and try to build something new. And in that latter stage, you got to create some innovative features into your product to make it like standing out of the rest. So that is the general approach I follow in most of my inventions, Dick.
Thanks, Rohan. A good question from the audience. Joe asks this question, and I'll let any one of you answer it. When one of your invention fails, how do you decide whether to end it or iterate further? And then on the flip side, when one of your inventions succeeds, how do you decide to pursue a commercialization path?
Thanks so much for the question, Joe. I guess, so what does it mean for an invention to fail, right? I guess is the first thing, right? I won't give a specific example, or I won't give the specifics of something for a complicated reason, but there have been many times when we've started off with something, and this is in companies, and we should talk about entrepreneurship later as well, by the way. In companies or in the lab or wherever, where we started off down a path and thought, this is the solution, this is what everybody needs, right? This was published in Nature, this has got to be what everybody needs. And you go down the path and you talk to people, you try to sell this person, try to sell to this person, and nobody's buying, right? But in the process of talking to those people and trying to sell this to that person and that to that person, you say, oh, you know what? This might not be the thing, but I think I know what the thing is. And so you can then pivot on the taking that knowledge that you learned and trying to you get out there and make sales into what can become a really incredible product. So again, I think what does it mean? Is that a failure? I don't know. And then how do you decide on a commercialization path? I think, again, as a practical matter, again, I'm always in favor of getting out there talking to people. But as a practical matter, there's tons of really got an invention, you think you've got something, tons of really good, well-structured programs out there that people can take advantage of, certainly here in the United States. I-Core, many of you would be familiar with, again, a really fantastic program. And I think going through that and again, talking to people, getting those prototypes, all that kind of stuff, really important. But at some point, you just got to do it. And I think what I see a reluctance in now is people go through these things and they get to the end and they're like, I don't know. It's never going to happen unless you actually take the leap. So, and the other thing is never going to be 100%, right? You're always going to have some doubt in it. So what I would say is you're never going to feel 100%, but if you're close enough, go for it.
Emmanuel, how would you say failure? What role does failure play in your invention process?
Well, I think there are two different kinds of failures. One is the technology didn't work. In other words, there were sort of holes in the solution that you think you found, and you keep iterating because you need a better and better solution. But the technology can be perfect, but fail in the market. And I think David just touched on that you found something that nobody cares for, or you cannot make it to scale, or you cannot make it to scale and sell it at a price where somebody cares for it. And so I would say that one needs to distinguish between where it didn't work, at what stage. I don't know which one is more disappointing, to be honest with you. But certainly, if you have no failures, you didn't try enough, or you are not. You were not out there. You were not playing. So you have to have these failures, and keep trying.
One of the things I'll mention here is that having the benefit of working with hundreds of inventors, they bring their inventions, we look at it, and we make decisions about, paths forward. I should probably write a story about the number of times that an invention really hit a dead end. Typically, like there be some kind of technical reason, or it could be application oriented. But that was the only way that the inventor, and sometimes with me involved a little bit, but the inventor made a left turn to go, oh, I hit that wall there, I'm going to try this. And they got to the point of solution only because they were willing to go down, let's call it the wrong path. Yeah. And I've seen a lot of that. Rohan, do you want to make a comment about failure?
Yeah. So as inventors, we are trying to do something the world has not seen before, right? So at some point of time in your project. So we're bound to fail at some point. So we should be prepared for that, every inventor, right? But you can design your project sort of fail-safe. So you can fail but safe, right? So as Dick pointed out, and also Emmanuel touched upon, right? You can have more than one solution to try out. So you're failing in one approach. It doesn't mean the dead end, right? So which will reduce your search space, sort of, right? Now you have a higher chance of being successful, trying out the other options, right? So the way I see about failures is that failures get you one step closer to the solution. The solution is there somewhere, right, deep in the problem itself. So unless you get to that depth, you won't be able to see the solution. So at that time, when the inventor goes through one failure after another, you're getting closer and closer to the solution. And at some point, you get the aha moment, right? The solution appears on your screen. So this happened to me. I think this happened to many other inventors. So that is, I think, the process. So failures are actually not to be taken as a very negative sense, but rather more positive sense. This is a requirement for inventors, I think.
We probably need to come up with a better word than failure. It's like, one of the, annoying steps along the way. Different question. David, I'll start with you. Do you think inventorship can be taught?
Yeah, thanks again. So again, let me go back. So why not? As I say, part of differentiating between inventing something and inventing something useful, understanding what a useful invention is almost definitely requires, or certainly now as things are advanced, definitely requires you to have some background in physics, math, biology, markets, whatever, law, whatever it happens to be, right? So I think you can argue that maybe there's some element of I grew up and I became interested in this, and because I used to, build things and whatever, that became a thing you were interested in. But I wouldn't let it go that that difference between that to invent something useful. There's a lot of things you need to learn to be able to understand the difference between those two. And so, so maybe there's some element of you were born or you were raised in a way that made you inherently interested in this, but there's a whole bunch of stuff behind you that it's certainly us that enabled us to get to the kind of inventions that we've been able to do. And that can certainly be taught.
You can teach it, Emmanuel?
I agree with that, actually. I think I would sort of divide it into two parts. There is the talent, for example, as playing a musical instrument. You have to have a certain talent, but then perfection comes with the teaching of it and the practice of it. Mm-hmm. And so I would say that there are aspects that one learns. And of course, they can be taught. And then there is the part, Dick, that you are teaching, if I can sort of say that, which is the mechanics of the invention, which is as important as the invention itself, in how you present it, and in how you end up writing up that invention to become a patent, so it can become a useful instrument afterwards. That part certainly can be taught.
Can be taught. You all have had many graduate students, I'm guessing, over the years. Do you think you have created an environment of teaching inventors in your labs?
I'm happy to say something.
Sure,
so Emmanuel kind of hit on this a minute ago, but one of the great things that happened to me and being here at Cornell, being part of that, is the ability to pursue entrepreneurship while being a professor. And I think, as Emmanuel said, you maybe your initial instinct as an academic is to kind of go out and just push along the science. When you go out there and become an entrepreneur and really try to sell something to somebody, that really makes you understand the other way. So much more now, having that experience now, we start off with the problem, understanding what we're trying to solve, and then come back and figure out what the basic science, basic engineering is that we need to be able to do. And so I like to think that students in my group get some of that education. What I try to relay to them is that it's important, again, I've kind of hit on this before, but that it's, even though you found a problem that you think is very, very exciting, you need to really understand what you can contribute to it. Like what is the resources I have? Say if you're a graduate student, what are the resources in my lab? What are the resources at the university? What is the background? What can I do that's going to be different than what everybody else has tried? Because if it's an exciting problem, somebody else is looking at it, right? And so you really got to think, it's not just I have to solve this problem, I have to think about what I'm going to do that's different.
I think the most important thing that we can do is to create a culture where the people in our group feel comfortable. And I will go back to many, many years ago where trying to tackle this kind of problems and being an inventor made you be what at that time was called applied science. And in some departments, in some schools, that was actually not viewed as a very good thing, certainly not worthy of a high-end academic. And so I think creating an environment, either in our own groups, in our own departments, colleges, and the university overall, where that environment, where that culture exists and is promoted, I think is the best thing we can do for the people in our groups.
Mm. Rohan, would you like to add?
Yeah. I think what we call it like building ecosystem. So every university faculty where innovation is happening, we need to create the environment, because otherwise the inventor would be like fighting alone, right? And he will fail, right? Sooner rather than later. We need to build ecosystem around the inventor. Other than the resources, the project management skills are required, and IP and commercialization, and talking to investors and agreements, right? When we transfer inventions, our technologies to the industries, it has to be done in a proper manner. I'm pretty sure Cornell has a very advanced system. It has the ecosystem. And I tried to build the same thing back in Sri Lanka in my university, and we were successful in getting there. So this, with the ecosystem, you have a very high chance of getting your inventions to a commercializable level, right, to products and sold out there in the markets.
I'll just make one comment here about inventorship can be taught. I believe that it can be, and I think I had this theory that we could teach it at the earliest of ages. And so I created a situation where I volunteered in a school district to be a supplemental teacher. I'd go in a couple days a week to teach inventorship. As they called me, I think I was Mr. Wizard or something. You know, I was supposed to teach science, but I was really teaching the elements of being a good inventor. And boy, did the students get turned on. These were third graders, and you were just kind of amazed at the things, the creative thinking. And so I thought that was a big success, but I got a call from the principal, and he asked me to tone it down because he said the students that I was turning on were creating problems in the classroom. So I thought, oh yeah, inventors can be kind of troublesome, can't they? So let me ask you guys this. After all these years on the journey of becoming an inventor, what words of advice would you give your 12-year-old self, Emmanuel? If you could go back to talk to yourself as a 12-year-old.
I think personally, maybe that's not true for others, I was much more rigid when I was a 12-year-old, black and white and things like that. And I think to be an inventor, to be an entrepreneur, as David said, which is sort of the other side, one needs to be much more open and let things kind of be open to the possibilities. And so I would tell myself to be much more open. I would say the same thing to myself now, but I would certainly say the same thing to a 12-year-old Emmanuel.
Right. David?
I would just say find out what you're interested in. The nature of where, well, maybe I'll leave that aside, but what I would just say, find out what you're interested in, figure that out, and pursue that.
Follow your passion.
Well, figure out what your passion is,
Yeah.
and then follow that.
Yeah, good advice, yeah. Rohan?
Yeah, I would say to myself, my 12-year self, okay, keep doing what you are interested in and try to build something just out of curiosity, but at the same time, think about intellectual property and how I bring it to the market, how to commercialize it. And also, do not work alone. Try to build teams, work with, think like people, right? And also, very importantly, try to find out a mentor. who can guide you in the proper way, because you're 12 years, right? So you don't know what is right, what is wrong, and you will learn by the hard way, right? And with the mentor, you can have your success rate up. So those are my advices to my 12-year self.
Thanks, Rohan. Some good questions here from the audience. It's a combination of question here from two people. Cristobal asks, can you give your view on unpatented inventions? What is the risk of imitation and counterfeit? And then the second question from Alaa is, pursuing a USPTO patent for every invention proved to be time-consuming and expensive, and many nowadays hold the view that patents don't really protect your invention. Are patents still the path for protection of an invention? Who would like to tackle that one?
Well, okay, I can start. I don't call myself an expert in prosecution of patents and IP in general, but I do know that decisions need to be made whether something needs to be patented or remains a trade secret. And sometimes I think, and again, Dick, I've learned this from you in your class, it's a portfolio that you have that combines all these different vehicles or tools that actually give value to the intellectual property. So it's not just patents, and the particular area that you are pursuing brings a different kind of a combination, a different kind of a portfolio that one needs to put together to make this viable.
David?
Well, here in the United States, we have strong intellectual property laws and protection. And so, so an invention aimed at the United States, having a patent is valuable and is an asset against which you can raise capital and so forth, right? Undoubtedly. I think if you're thinking internationally, in lots of places where intellectual property protection may not be that strong, you still want to make a business, then things like trade secrets or finding other methods by which you can defeat or by which you can compete are probably more important.
Rohan, any comment?
Yeah. So I agree with Emmanuel and David. You have two options, whether you want to protect your invention through a patent or you can keep it as a trade secret. Or in the same time, you have something in between also. You can publish for academic requirements without disclosing the whole thing, the data and some other things you can keep to yourself, so that you are not disclosing the whole thing, right? Even if someone else got to know about your patent, it doesn't have the complete blueprint, right? In patents, that is a requirement, but none of these requirements are actually perfect. So always you can find a way to protect your IP. Best thing is to figure out where is your market, where is your customer, and then patent in that jurisdiction. And all the other jurisdictions, you can just forget about it. Someone copies it in some other country where the market is not very huge, and you think they can export it back to your main markets in other countries. There are laws to prevent that. So therefore, law is pretty stern, and protection is there.
I'll just add, alluding to what Emmanuel said about my teaching, I teach a concept called the property control position, which is that you take each invention on its own, it's a case by case, and you determine what's the optimal protection. Patent, utility patent, even design patents, trade secret, a trademark, a copyright. And each one's a little bit different. And to say, one size fits all, everyone should be patented, no, that's not right. I'll say, though, that a really valuable patent, I always love to have a good valuable patent. And a valuable trade secret as well, and I teach how to combine those. It doesn't have to be either or. So you got to get a little creative with your patent or your IP coverage. And We're not going to talk about bioproperty today because we're not dealing with life sciences. But in the life sciences, you've got things like cell lines and whole plants. And that's another area that we could...
I'll maybe just add to that. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But, of course, a patent doesn't actually... It's an instrument against which you can pursue someone who may be infringing on it, right? It doesn't actually... It isn't a force field that protects someone from doing what you believe you have been doing. And to prosecute that is expensive, right? And so as you're thinking about intellectual property, so maybe this is a better answer than I gave earlier to whether to pursue patenting. You have to think about whether or not you think what you are patenting is valuable enough such that if someone else does the same thing, it would be worthwhile to go out and sue them, basically.
Stop them.
Yeah.
Absolutely right. I mean, the cost-effective analysis is always part of that whole property control position. Someone has asked a question regarding the commercialization path. We've talked about that throughout our discussion here about entrepreneurship and application, and it's kind of like the other hand clapping, isn't it, of inventions in many ways. Regarding the commercialization path, what is the most critical factor in deciding whether an invention is ready for the global market versus keeping it in an R&D phase? Who would like to tackle that?
A simple answer is you go out there and try to sell it and see if somebody buys it.
Yeah, or customer discovery, so to speak.
So again, there's nothing. It's a customer discovery. Sure, yeah, you can go in and interview people, but my lived experience, anyways, is that people will always tell you something's useful. Oh, I could use 100 of these tomorrow, right? And then it's like, okay, well, this is what the price is, right? And then if they're going to pay that for those 100, that's great. If it's like, well, I didn't realize that I had, that kind of a thing. So absolutely, customer discovery, all those things are really, really good. But there's no replacement for having somebody actually making a sale.
Emmanuel, were you going to say?
Oh, I was going to add that, of course, not only that somebody is ready to buy, but what you are selling is ready to be sold. Especially in academic environments, the scale up and prototype is not always to the point where you are ready to sell it. And quite honestly, that's one of the, at least from my point of view, that is one of the difficulties in an academic setting where we take our technologies and scale them enough so that they can be ready for the real world. And that's where sometimes there is a disconnect.
Yeah, I had a direct experience with a Cornell spinoff, a Cornell-owned patent that was the basis of a startup, and they had done a lot of the work necessary, but then they went out and they sold it. They took orders, and next thing you know, they had thousands of orders to fill, but they had never really worked out the kinks of the scale-up, right? And they ended up disappointing a lot of people, and that was the beginning of a spiral down until they had to, re-engineer and reinvent the whole company model. So, yeah, you got to sell it and maybe make sure that you can sell it, and not just sell it, but deliver it. And here's the other thing I say to entrepreneurs. They come to me and they say, yeah, we've got a lot of sales. And I go, great. How many of them are repeat sales? Because that's, good salesperson can sell it, but will that customer come back? Do you want to say anything, David? You've talked a little bit about entrepreneurship, and we all have a little bit more about maybe being an inventor in an entrepreneurial environment. Is that different than being in an academic environment, would you say?
Yeah, very different, and partly because again, it depends on I can't speak to every company, but part of it is because you're much more directly engaged with the customer. Like here in an academic environment, we have freedom, we have ability to raise capital in the form of grants and things like this, where you're not as directly engaged with a customer. In an entrepreneurial environment, for at least the companies I've been involved with, If you're doing it right, you're talking to the customer all the time. And so you're being an inventor in a way that is much more responsive to, again, making that sale, rather than being responsive to, say, what you promised in a grant or something like that.
I joke that I've been an entrepreneur from the comfort and safety of my tenure academic position. There is a huge difference between being an entrepreneur in an academic environment and having a job and a paycheck, and being an entrepreneur in a company, in a startup, where that paycheck might not be guaranteed. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, good point. Rohan?
Yeah, so if you have a product that you think is ready to sell, but you haven't thought of it at the early stage, I think it's a tough situation to everybody, including the inventor himself. So I think if he can sort it out at the early stage of problem solving or the project, right? What is that product you want to see at the end of the process? What is the specification? You can get as close as possible to the final product. So I think that is the decision we have to make when we embark on any innovative projects, whether it is just for a project, for a publication, or whether it is actually going to end up as a product in the market. So we have to figure that out, the pathway, right, as much as possible. But if it is not possible, of course, you have to take that challenge. So proceed the project to whatever level, and then figure out whether there's a market for this product. So there are so many questions that you will face at that point. You have to go a lot of back and forth to fix the problems, right? So I really don't want to be in that situation, though it is somewhat inevitable in some projects. But what I do usually is that I talk to my sponsor and then figure out how he or she wants to commercialize it at the end. If we build a product like that, of course, we are building a prototype in a university, but when we have the POC and the initial prototype, we're going to redesign it for manufacture. So all the components are going to be different designs, but probably the same or better functionality. So this lineup, I would rather prepare this lineup, at least briefly, so that I will not be putting myself in big trouble in the way when we try to commercialize the prototype. Yeah.
Thanks, Rohan. Well, I'll make one quick comment here about this. I'll say kind of a dichotomy between being inventions in the academic environment, R&D environment, versus the private sector company entrepreneurial environment. Very different. And I used to, as director of the tech transfer office at Cornell, we'd get these inventions, and on the one hand, you're kind of like, well, yeah, that's really interesting, but it doesn't really have commercialization viability. In fact, only about 50% of the inventions that would be submitted to the office were pursued, in part because of commercialization, lack of viability, but also the IP. But here's the thing, that it's a little bit of I have a Jekyll Hyde feeling about it, and that is that at a university, you also get these inventions where the inventors are not really looking to solve that market problem. Mm-hmm. And therefore, they're kind of free to create these things that might be just like, oh, wow, what in the world are we going to do with this? This could create a new industry. This is disruptive, et cetera. So it's exciting. You get a lot of failures, but on the other hand, you also get some really spectacular developments. We have just a very few minutes. If any of the three of you would like to make any comments about anything we've talked about being an inventor, about inventions, would you like to final comments?
It's an exciting thing to be able to, one of the most rewarding things in my professional career has been able to see something go from a little speck of something in the lab up to a product and a company and beyond. And so if you're either an inventor and you're thinking about something, you have an idea and you feel like you've got a unique solution, go for it. You only live once.
I would just second what David said. Although I have not been an entrepreneur myself, a couple of the things that were invented in my lab have been picked up by startups. And it's really exciting, as David said, to see something that it was invented through a lot of effort and a lot of failures in between to actually be now scale up and sold in ton quantity and talk to real customers in a particular application. It's an exciting journey. And I've learned a lot, sort of being part of that. And as David said, I really highly recommend it. We are lucky, actually, that the environment has changed dramatically from the early days, where some of these things were not actually, were not encouraged in the first place. They were even actually discouraged. And so it's good to be part of an institution that encourages, and it's certainly good to be part of a group that are the ones who have been inventive, and I'm here now taking credit for their successes.
Thanks, Emmanuel. Rohan, any final comments?
Yeah, I would give a little piece of advice for the young inventors who are here, because being an inventor, you're going to draw a lot of time, effort from your academic work, right, to something which is not very prospective immediately, because the inventive career has a lot of failures in the early stage. So therefore, you're gonna, if you press too hard on inventions as a student, you probably will perform poorly in classes, and you will disappoint your parents and class teachers, right? So be aware of that and try to strike a balance between your academic work and your inventive journey, and try to bring it gradually up. So that is my piece of advice for young inventors who are here today.
Thanks, Rohan. Well, I'll just end by saying maybe you all in the audience can get a sense of what a great experience it's been for me as a profession to work with people like this, to work with great inventors. Every day is something new. We're cutting edge. There's a chance of failure. There's risk that things won't work out. But at the end of the day, one thing I will say about inventors, and almost every inventor I've ever run into wants to do something good for humanity, see an impact, see their invention realized and solving real problems. And all the inventors I know want to do good for humanity. That's one of the things that has been a common theme that the inventors that I've worked with and our present inventors are good examples of that. So thank you all for joining our discussion today. I really appreciate it. Like I said, the first time I've got a chance to really sit down with a group of inventors and have a discussion, and we could do a lot more of this. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dick. Thank you, everyone.